Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce everybody to my dear friend, my colleague, my co-host, and my spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you this fine day?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you? You're looking so good.
Outstanding. So good to be back with you. And we are joined today by a number of our friends on our Zoom call live. We also are joined, of course, all around the world by people listening on the internet and right in the local area here in Cleveland on AM/FM radio, WINT. And we also have a lot of people that are now starting to go out to our YouTube site, Stress-Free Living Radio, where we have, at this point, about 60 of our shows. Ratanjit, I've got to calculate again how many shows we've done, many, many hundreds of them over the years. But we've got about 60 of them that are available to you anytime that you'd like to go out and revisit a variety of topics, or maybe share those with some people that are going through certain circumstances. And perhaps some of the thoughts that we share on this show might help them through that case. Our intent is really to eliminate the stress in our life. And that's kind of a broad way of saying, are we running in the direction that we were intended to run? Are we going forward, or are we trying to go places by putting our car in reverse, our body in reverse, and kind of fighting the against the nature and the regular process that we were designed to have? So Ratanjit, I think that brings us to today's topic. Forgiveness is such a critical part of life, to be able to forgive, to be able to have people forgive us, because we all make mistakes. We all do things wrong. We all have regrets. And to know that people truly forgive us is an incredibly strong, gratifying feeling that we have been forgiven. And I think it's just as gratifying and fulfilling when we are the forgiver. If we can get something out of our mind and stop letting it break our heart and say, I forgive you, and I totally do. I'm not just using words, I really do forgive you. Those scenarios, I think, are a vital part of removing stress from our life. So let's understand forgiveness. Let's talk about it today. And what does it really mean, and how do we really make it happen?
It's a very important topic. And once, anything which happens bad to us, either by somebody or by ourselves, so it creates very negative thoughts. When it is done to us, we call it injustice, somebody's taking advantage of us, somebody's harming us. Basically, when we live with that emotion, our blood pressure all goes up and we get into depression mode. And as a consequence, our cholesterol goes up, our sleep gets impaired, and as our body is not fully available to us. So what we are doing is, when we have that feeling and we live with this feeling, continuously remind us that I was done wrong, basically we are further harming ourselves, our body, our life. And also when we have done something wrong and we don't forgive ourselves, so as a consequence of that is we deplete our confidence level, we deplete again our energy level, and we feel sorry for ourselves. And as a consequence, we live in the past. So all this fundamentally, this basically does is parks us in past. this guy has done this to me, this person has done this to me, or I have done this, or circumstances, why it happened to me. When I am such a good person, why doesn't happen to somebody else who is, in my eyes, not a good person? And as a consequence of that, so we live with this guilt. So we ends up and basically punishing ourselves and compromising ourselves in this process. Ray?
It's interesting. I thought I covered it when I opened up by saying forgiving others and being forgiven, but you've added the third element there of forgiving ourselves. And in some ways, maybe that's the most critical one of all, because even if others forgive me for a mistake I made, if I still won't let go of that, and I feel guilty about that for the rest of my life, and it continues to drain my self-confidence, and it drains how I feel positive about what I can do. And I'm a little timid now. I'm a little more afraid. I'm whatever it is. In some ways, that is at the same level of importance, or maybe even more importance than the other two. So you're right. There's really three types, three different situations that we're in. We talk a lot about expectations, Ratanjit. It's been a major topic that we've had over the years. And we've always come to the conclusion that expectations can get us in big trouble, because it's really difficult for things to play out the way we expect them to. It really is difficult for people that we don't have any control of whatsoever. Everybody's free to do what they want, to act in a way that we expect them to act. And so I wonder, where does expectations fit into this? Are we setting ourselves up for situations, for failure with our expectations, and we're then asking for forgiveness, or we are asking people we expect ourselves to forgive others when they really didn't do anything wrong, when they just didn't live up to our expectations, or we didn't live up to our own expectations?
It's a very important issue. What happens is, based on life's expectation, which is given to us by our family, by our circumstance, by our country, by our nation, by our history, by all these things, we accumulate our knowledge and understanding based on if I do this, this will happen. Science is based on that basic fact. If I do these things under these circumstances, if I boil the water under atmospheric pressure, it is going to boil at a certain temperature. So this is expected. So anytime these expectations are mental and emotional rather than based on fact, so then we hijack ourselves. We basically become dependent on that. And if they do not come through, if my expectation is, if I love you, if I be kind to you, you're going to react in a certain way. So what happens is, the other person, without knowing their condition and their circumstances, we expect them to behave in certain ways. So anytime somebody is preoccupied by something happened to them, some tragedy happened to them, they are not fully able to listen to you, they are not able to fully understand you, they are not able to react to your kindness. You rate them as either arrogant or bad manners or whatever it is, without knowing their circumstances. So what happens is, we don't have room to understand a situation or other situation. So at best, Ray, we have talked about this thing that we can never be uh, other than student, we always are keeping our mind, our emotions open. And based on that, we are not having any expectations. And we are basically having, if at best, expectation from us, rather than having expectation from others, because we do not control them. Only person, if we control, is our emotion. And that also we don't control. So as a consequence of, we become victim of circumstance. Go ahead.
And even when it comes to, I totally agree with you, but even when it comes to our own expectations of ourselves, I think we should look at it in terms of goals, purpose, mission, things we're trying to accomplish, not expectations of what we will. Because even when it comes to ourselves, we really, we don't know all the circumstances that are going to happen around us that are going to affect what we do and how we act. So I think relative to forgiveness, I really do think it comes to play, because if you gave an example of, okay, I'm going to be kind to someone, so I think they're going to be kind back to me. And now you weren't kind back to me. So now I feel that, you owe me an apology. Okay. And so now there needs to be forgiveness in place. And the whole thing was set up on this level of expectations. It really wasn't set up on reality. There really wasn't anything that harmful that really happened. And yet, based on what we expected to happen, we think forgiveness needs to take place. I think a lot of the situations that we're into, certainly there's a lot of bad things that do happen between people and harmful things that are done, but I think a lot of them are at a level of expectations. There's not really, if you sit back on it, it's like, okay, it really wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. So expectation, in one sense, is a mixed bag. Our society runs on expectation. If I hire an employee, I expect them to work certain hours, do certain things. And when they do not do those things, and I rate them as a poor employee. And many times I end up firing them, rather than understanding why they are not performing what they are supposed to do. So understanding these things allow us to convert a poor employee into a better employee, a poor circumstance into better circumstance. Our purpose of life is always to make our best better. So if we focus on that scenario and do not decide good or bad, when we decide somebody has behaved badly, we become upset and we give control of our pleasure or happiness to circumstances, which is what we live. We live our life controlled by other incomplete thoughts, incomplete facts, incomplete situations. Go ahead.
Well, as we're talking about understanding, and we sidebarred a little bit there with understanding expectations, but I think the whole show that we have done for all these years is really talking about understanding things at a deeper level. And you're so good at putting a different spin on things, allowing me to look at things and understand them from a different perspective, because it's so easy through our education system and even with our parenting and other environmental influences like that, just to kind of go along with, well, this is the way we always do it. And I enjoy very much a deeper, in-depth look at something as important as forgiveness. I mean, I really hope people are enjoying the program here today like I am so far, because forgiveness is such a vital part of our life, to be able to forgive others and be forgiven, and to look at it more in depth, to really think about, what does it take for me to truly forgive somebody? And I think a lot of forgiveness that we call forgiveness is just kind of like, all right, I'll forgive you this time, but you better forgive me next time. Your unconditional kind of words that you always talk about, unconditional love. Is it realistic to think that we can have unconditional forgiveness?
See, forgiveness is an incomplete process. When we forgive, we take that circumstance as the final product. We do not investigate why it happened. Somebody harmed us. We take that surface phenomena and become very angry with that person, why he took advantage of me, why she behaved in such a manner. So if we are hurt, if whether it's emotionally or physically, then we hold that person constantly in the fault, but we never go further why it happened, why somebody did that. So circumstances, whenever good or bad thing happens, we have to go further. So if I have poor handwriting, and because I cannot get a job because of my, right now, of course, nobody cares about the handwriting. So there used to be, or if I have another habit, which is holding me from getting a job. So instead of blaming and correcting that, I have to understand that, why am I having this drawback? Can I improve upon this drawback? So similarly, when somebody behaves in certain fashion, if we have empathy, if we understand, and if we have compassion, and we begin to understand why they did that, and remove the basic reason why they behaved in such a manner. So the forgiveness really is our ego exercise.
I think what we do is, you're exactly right, but I think we do kind of replay it in our mind, but we replay what happened. We do go back and say, okay, let me remember again what he said, what I said, what she said, what he did. We replay that, and we try to look at it more in depth, but I don't think go into understanding why those things were done. Yes. It's like we rewind the video so we can see it again and again and again and again. And when we do that, it just hurts us more each time. We revisit the pain, and we revisit the whole situation and the scenario. And each time we watch that in our mind, that replay, we get more upset about it. But you're right. I don't know if we really try to understand what provoked that situation, how it happened in the first place. And even again, if there were some level of expectations in there, unreasonable expectations, impossible expectations that had a role in the whole thing. We're just getting into the topic here today of understanding forgiveness, how we can allow ourselves to really be more of a forgiving person and let go of the problems that happen, how we can put ourselves in a position where we can deserve to be forgiven if we make that type of mistake in our life that we regret. It's an important topic, and we're so glad you're with us. We'll be right back on this edition of Stress Free Living. Stay with us. All right, we have a moment or two. I know we're just scratching the surface, but if you've got a thought, please join us.
Ray, of course, I always
Yes.
have a thought. Steve Marsh.
Good. Yes.
Two thoughts. If one were to summarize what you two have talked about, one might say the bottom line is we can only control our behavior and our thoughts. We have no control over other people's. So that's part one. And Ratanjit did say that. And so again, we have to modify our behavior because you can't control or, affect what the other person does. The other thing is there's a saying that we always use that, oh, you should forgive, but don't forget. And you hear that about a lot of things. Well, the problem is if what Ratanjit said was, if you don't forget it, you'll bring it back. As you said in your discussion, you bring back the memories, why it had So maybe we have to forgive and forget, but that's a very difficult thing for us to do, for me especially.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? We have a few seconds. If anybody has a thought, anything you want me to ask, Ratanjit?
Good morning. This is Doug.
Yes, Doug.
I guess the only thing that's going through my mind, and I don't know if it's a thought for Ratanjit, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, it's really easy for me to forgive someone that I really love. I'll pick my beautiful wife. Oh man, that's easy. Oh yeah, I didn't like that what she did, but I can forgive her really easy. But someone you don't like so well, it's a lot more difficult. It's like, oh, I don't know. I don't even know if I want to forgive him. So anyway, back to Ratanjit.
Good point.
Good point.
Good point. Okay, we're coming back. We are back on Stress Free Living, talking in between our different segments of our show with our Zoom callers. And if you would like to be part of our Zoom audience, that we can actually see you and interact with you, and they can see us too. Maybe they don't want to, but they're stuck with that part of the Zoom call. And but what's nice about it is that in between the breaks, during the breaks, we are able to get some additional thoughts and questions that we can talk about on the show. And then afterwards, we take whatever time people have together, and we kind of do a post show and review what we've talked about. And oftentimes it leads to developing topics for future shows. So we invite you to be a part of that Zoom experience with us. If you'd like to be part of our special stress-free living group that we really appreciate and enjoy so much, and just contact us by way of email, Facebook, or whatever, and we will absolutely give you that invitation and entranceway to our Zoom membership. We got to come up with a fancy title for this, right? We've been doing it now for a couple of years. We got to figure out what we call that elite club that gets together every Saturday like we do. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Let's get back to our.
I also have to mention that after our show, we have open conversation with Zoom audience. So once you join us on Zoom, you can have free time to ask questions or make a comment after the show.
Yep. And what you only charge like what, $10,000 an hour for that, right? Like these professionals do. That's what they're getting these days, Ratanjit. We're missing our boat. No, it's totally free, just so that there's no confusion. The whole thing is free, and we'd love to have you. All right, let's go to one of the questions or one of the comments that was made here during the break. It's one that I laughed at internally because it's so true. When we talk about forgiveness, a lot of times it's from the perspective of who we are forgiving. If we love somebody, if we have a relationship, if it's our brother or a sister or our parents or our spouse or somebody else who's very important to us, who we have a relationship with, sometimes that's very easy to forgive, okay? I've known you for 30 years. We've been together. I've known you my whole life. You're my brother. We're blood. We're family. I forgive you. And I do. It's done, okay? People who are so-called strangers, maybe they are just somebody we work with and somebody we have a little relationship with. Maybe it's a one-time deal that we're doing with somebody and it doesn't go right. It's really more difficult. Is there a way, I mean, is that normal? I guess that's human nature, to use my term that I like a lot, that you don't. But is that to be expected, that forgiveness is much easier between people we love than with people that we don't have that relationship with?
So first of all, what we call love is really, if I love you, you love me. So it's a trade. We never understand the pure love. Pure love is not, we are loving somebody's habit, we are not loving somebody's money, we are not loving somebody's physique, we are not loving somebody's outer shell. So the true love only happens when we love the divine power which enlivens you. So when you begin to love yourself, so when you love your habits, your color, your gender, your circumstance, your wealth, which is false love, once you know that truly you are the power which enlivens this human body, and that you begin to love, then you are able to see the same divine power in everyone else. And you begin to love that common one divine power present in all of us. So suddenly, everyone's respect and love and all the tolerance goes up. So there is another aspect of this whole thing. So when somebody does something for you randomly, not knowingly, not willingly, you have more chance of forgiving them because they didn't do it intentionally, right? So
Right.
in other words, they did not have that control at that moment when things happen. Somebody accidentally hit you, somebody did that. So the same thing happens in case of mental illness. Some people who are mentally incapable of understanding the right circumstance, they end up doing something normally a good person with the right mental attitude would do. So mental illness, even or law, when somebody is proven to be mentally suffering, their sentence is reduced or eliminated, right?
Yes,
So,
for sure. Yeah. I
any,
mean, it's a plea of insanity.
yeah,
I mean, basically, at the highest regard, they let you off for murder if you
right.
plead insanity, right?
So now what happens if somebody did something wrong with you, hurt you, or taken advantage of you? At that point, their mental status was incorrect. So they were not mentally right. So,
Right.
to
Yeah.
hold this grudge against somebody who's mentally not stable at the moment they reacted wrongly with you is incorrect. So once,
Ratanjit, you gave me when I was going through on a personal basis many years ago. I was in your home and we were talking, and you gave me a tremendous analogy that I have shared with so many other people subsequently. Somebody had wronged me, and I was really upset about it. And I remember talking to you, and you gave me an example. You says, if a 2-year-old child came in front of you and said, "You're stupid," would you give that any credibility? And my answer was no. A 2-year-old has no idea. He doesn't know what stupid means even yet. So he's ignorant of the reality of definitions. So no, it wouldn't bother me at all. And your answer was, well, what difference does it make that the 30-year-old person that had hurt me had said those words? If they also were ignorant of the details and the facts and the understanding of the situation, it's no different than a 2-year-old who calls you stupid. And that made such an impression on me that said, you don't have to, some people are 2 years old relative to understanding many aspects of life. They just, whether we call it a mental illness or an ignorance is probably a nicer term for it. But, some people are unable to have an understanding of some of the facts that they need to know to be able to have a relationship, to be able to have a conversation, to be able to assess a situation and react like we would think they should act. And so that changed me ever since that conversation, to understand that says, and it kind of goes back to expectations too, but it's like some people just are unable to do the things that we want them to do through no fault of their own. They just don't have the capacity, the awareness, the understanding, the knowledge, the experience. Age is a big factor on that. I mean, what we expect a 20-year-old person to do compared to a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old person, there's a big difference after you go through the years of life and you get tempered by the realities of life.
So it so happens generally people have negative experience in life, so they are very turned off from the life itself. They have negativity growing in them. So generally they are always going to act erroneously under most circumstances. People who are happy, generally they are nicer people. There are people who are unhappy, they are generally not very nice people. So it is, inner poison affects our society. Inner poison allow you to either be right, good person, or a bad person in that terms. So ultimately, our role is to eliminate that negativity in whoever we come across by talking to them or by behaving with them and being nicer to them. So if there was a person who would not see me in my business and somehow had a prejudice against me, and this guy ties a turban, so I don't want to see him, he's this, and so on. But I never held this thing against him. So there was a circumstance when my services badly needed by this person. And so ultimately his assistant said, this person you hate can solve your problem. So finally he contacted me and we became very good friends. And he says, I never knew you are such a nice guy. I hated you because of what you appear to be, what my concept about you was. So it is always better to not judge a person by the act they perform. It is always, we can change their act, we can change their habit, we can change their mental capacity, and our effort is constant to convert people into goodness, constantly bring out the goodness in people. So as a consequence, we gain more by contacting these people. Their goodness affects us more and anybody who has come around them. Ray?
I want to get back to another question from one of our other Zoom guests. They said that, they find it easy to forgive, but the forgive and forget part is difficult. And maybe there's even an idea that says, I'm going to forgive, but I'm not going to forget. And that's even part of the stakes and issue. Okay, I'll forgive you, but I'm not going to forget this happened. How can we get to the point where we forgive and forget so that we don't hold on to it and cause that stress within us, and also really impact that relationship going on. Because if we can't forget it, even if we say we've forgiven you, every time we meet you, I'm still going to remember that situation because I can't forget it. How can we really forgive and forget?
So when we don't forget, what we remember is what happened to us. Somebody harmed us, somebody hit us, somebody said something bad to us. That's all we remember. We cannot forget that. But we have to go further than that. We have to expand our memory bank by understanding why they did what they did. So once you expand your memory to that understanding, suddenly that X becomes very dilute. So you begin to understand why that happened, why it harmed me. And another thing is that we, after listening to this program, people say, yeah, he's right, but it's very difficult to forget. So we have to remember, our knowledge will never transform you. Our habit will always transform you. You have a habit of not forgiving, habit of not forgiving or forgetting. So you have to change that habit. You have to cultivate a habit of finding why it happened, what circumstances made that person do what they did, and go forward to help them to change that habit into doing the right things. Ray?
I have a slightly different approach to that idea, and it works for me. Is that what you're saying is expand your memory banks. So if you're just going to remember what happened, also remember the understanding of how it happened, why it happened, what their conditions were. That's too much for my little brain. Okay, to expand it, I want to shorten it. I want to reduce what I have to remember. So I want to say in my life that, okay, it doesn't even matter anything about it. I intentionally want to forget the entire incident, what happened, how I felt, the pain that was experienced, the emotion. I want to forget the understanding of it and how it happened and why it happened. I want to forget everything. Once I forgive something and forgive somebody in the situation, I want to release that entire thing so that when I do see you the next time on a street corner that I haven't seen you in 5 years, I want to give you a hug and embrace you and say, hey, old friend, how are you? To me, it's easier just to like pretend that never happened. Just remove it. Even if it was a deep hurt, just to say, I don't want to keep this. My brain is too limited in ability to keep all of that. I gotta let go of all of it, cut it right off and remove it. I can't say I do that all the time. I mean, there's sometimes I can't let go, but for the most part, I just want to remove it from the whole brain.
So in order to explore why it happened and what the circumstances made him do what, or her do what he did or she did to me. So sometimes we don't have time, sometimes we don't have resources, sometimes we don't have circumstances to find out why they did that. But this knowledge that there is something else made them do what they did itself is going to help you forget this. Because you are now away from the act itself, although why they did that and what circumstances made them do that, you don't have time to find out, you don't have resources to find out. So sometimes we cannot find out, but there is a reason why they did what they did.
Mm-hmm. I think both of those are good plans. But one of the two has to be done. Either you have to be willing to cut the cord and let go and truly forget it.
That will help you.
Get it,
That will help you cut the cord.
Yeah, or doing it, the more expanded way that you're suggesting, which is the in-depth understanding of how and why it happened. And then, retaining that so that you don't just have the memory that something bad happened, but you also have the association of understanding why it happened. And that's the more thorough. But I think you're right. If you simply, the main option that most of us do, I think, is simply remember the incident. Not why, not understanding how and what the factors were, but we can't let go that you did this to me, and actually that's the most, in those scenarios, when I have been in those scenarios, whether it's been against me or me doing it, it's the most frustrating of all. It's like, will you let it go already? That happened 12 years ago. I've tried to explain to you over and over again how this happened and why this happened and what the settings were, but they just come back to say, but this happened, you did this. And that's like one of the life's most frustrating things, when you've harmed a relationship and people aren't willing to understand what happened. They're not willing to look at it in depth. They just take it at the surface that you hurt me. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation.
Yeah.
where that understanding just can't happen.
Supposing you are having dinner at a restaurant and suddenly somebody threw a knife at you and it hurt you in your eyes. And you suddenly have to be taken to hospital, and somehow or other your eyes was saved and all that. So you are very upset why this person did what they did. So later on, instead of this, you wanted to find out, you wanted to go into depth. And then you came to know that the person who threw out this knife ended up losing his mother in the hospital, and he was having dinner and he was very upset. He was throwing everything all around. So suddenly you will be more compassionate to that person who has lost his loved one and acted not because of he wanted to hurt you, but as a consequence, it has happened. So until you go into detail that those things don't become available to you, don't become open the door for compassion and understanding and empathy for you.
All of this today, we are opening up a better understanding of what forgiveness is and how we need forgiveness in our lives, how we need to forgive others, and how we need to be forgiven and how that can happen. We've got a couple more thoughts that we want to share with you on really understanding forgiveness, especially the unconditional forgiveness that we've alluded to a couple of times. How can we really let go fully of what has happened to us and open the door for people to unconditionally forgive us? That's what we'll wrap it up with when we come back on this edition of Stress Free Living. Stay with us. All right. I tried to get some of your questions in. Now we have another few seconds if you have any other thoughts.
Hi, this is Ken Mehta.
It's Ken.
I have a simple comment. I think what we are talking about is forgiveness under two stages where, like Doug said, for strangers, or like Steve said, we can do what we can do. We can control ourselves. But based on the type of harm and who did it to you, it probably will change a little bit something in understanding. But what Ratanjit indicated is the need for unconditional forgiveness. So if we forgive and not forget, who are we hurting really? Ourselves or the person you are not forgetting about? Once you reach that stage that I'm hurting by myself for not forgetting it, what's the point? Not only I'm keeping an anger inside me, it's not going to achieve anything. It's not hurting the other person, I'm hurting myself. So reaching to the level of unconditional forgiveness, we can find out the cause, we can find out whatever we want to, or excuse why other person hurt you. May or may not help you, but what probably would help you understand that if you won't forget it, it's hurting yourself, nobody else. That's what Ratanjit is pointing out. Reaching to that unconditional forgiveness is the ultimate goal we need to achieve to get to that point. And it's very hard.
All right. Thank you. We're back to the show here. We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit and yours truly, Ray Samich, with you and discussing forgiveness and how we can understand forgiveness. And during our breaks, again, we were talking with some of our Zoom callers. We appreciate them so much. Ratanjit, let's continue with the thought that you and I just heard from one of our Zoom guests. Our whole conversation has been about understanding forgiveness more so that we can, evaluate it, analyze it, and get through it. One of our guests just kind of said, does any of that really matter? I mean, ultimately, we're the one that's feeling that pain. We're the one that's holding that grudge against somebody, or we're fearing losing something if haven't been forgiven. Should we just try to unconditionally forgive all the time? Unconditionally forget all of those things that we have done all the time? And it really doesn't matter how it happened, why it happened, what happened. Just kind of, say, hey, it happened. I'm moving on. I forgive you no matter what you did. I know that I made a mistake, so I'm going to forgive myself no matter what I did and just move on. Is that a goal that we should have in life?
So unconditional forgiveness only happens once you understand oneness. So what happens is, my old example of you are hitting a nail in the wall and you're holding the nail with left hand, you are hammering with right hand, and accidentally you hit your thumb and it is bleeding profusely, and now you are hurting, and you will never forget that. But you will never hold that grudge against yourself, because it is you have hurt you. So it is the same thing. Once you realize the real us is not the outer body, but the power which enlivens us, which is exactly the same. So oneness allows us to see others in the light of, as I see my left hand and right hand. So you are basically cannot punish yourself, and you can hold, you feel sorry for it, you have pain for it, but ultimately there is nothing to forgive or forget once you focus on oneness, once you see others as you, and you don't see the duality, which is you and me. And ultimately, that is what makes you forgive unconditionally, right?
That is the beautiful, perfect spiritual approach to this. And I don't disregard that at all. You're 100% right. If we can get to that point, that's perfection. But what the caller was saying, what our guest was saying, was that even if you disregard, if you will, the spiritual aspect of it, if you just look at it as a human being saying, you know what, I'm only carrying this grudge within me. It's only hurting me to continue to live in the past. It's only holding me back. It's only allowing me to feel this pain every day that I don't forgive and forget. So, I know that's not operating at the level of spirituality that we want. But even from a human standpoint, it's like this is the proper way of doing it, because to carry that grudge, to bring you down, for that to be on your mind every day of your life, that this person harmed me. I mean, you're not going to enjoy our human life either. We're only hurting ourselves. And as he pointed out, the other person that's engaged in that doesn't even know that we're thinking of this every day, that it's hurting us every day, that this is still tormenting us. So we're not doing anything to hurt them by holding that grudge or by having an inability to forget. We're only hurting ourselves. So this kind of makes sense both at the ultimate spiritual level, but it even makes sense on a human level, doesn't it?
Yes, it is mental exercise to go through that, and which allows you. But this, until you forgive the other person completely, which only can happen once you see yourself in them. So ultimately, when that person comes in front of you, the agony and pain still appears, although
Yeah.
you have stayed away from it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I buy that. So it's not true forgiveness. It's kind of like pseudo forgiveness, right? Like you use that term. It's
yes,
like, okay, I'm doing this so that I can get on with my life. But you're right. When I do see that person again, at a dinner party, it's all going to come back to me. I
yes.
truly, yes. Okay. Makes sense. Very good point. We're down to the last few minutes, and I know we wanted to talk about the different types of forgiveness. And there's been so many other things that we were able to talk about. We didn't get to them. I don't know if we can do it in 3 minutes, but I think it does add value to the program just to understand those three. Do you want to try to bother that, or should we take that into a different show?
Yeah, mentally, you can divide that in forgiveness, total forgiveness, which is exoneration of the whole thing. And then you have another forgiveness conditionally, which is forbearance. If you don't do this, I'll forgive you. And then there's you can release that whole thing and be free of that. So all these are all mental exercises.
Yeah,
So
but
I,
I think just to take one more minute on it, the release type, because this is what we do. The release type of forgiveness is where we say, you did do it. I'm still upset about it,
yes,
but I'm going to release you of the situation right now. So I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not going to exonerate you. I'm not going to say you're fine and you're clear, and I'm not really going to forget. I'm just going to give you a pass.
ego.
And it's my ego in play. Absolutely. My ego is in play. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to forget this, so that the next time, I make a mistake, you darn well better forgive me, because I've forgiven you. Okay. So I think that's that type. A forbearance is an interesting type of forgiveness, because it's like a temporary,
Conditional.
I'm going to give you a temporary pass.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to forgive you
Conditional.
for right now.
If you don't do this, I'll do this. So
Yeah, right. Okay. Yes. And maybe even to say, since it is kind of a trade on a forbearance basis, what, you got a better car than me. So when I need to impress somebody, you're going to let me use your car. Okay. It's kind of like that kind of a deal. Okay. The exoneration is the true forgiveness. Okay. The exoneration says, you know what? I'm just going to forget it. I'm just going to, I've understood the circumstances. I've had the time to really look at what you said and I said, and what made you say what you said, and where my heart was when I said it, and how it all transplayed. And you know what? We're just going to forget this ever happened, and get on with life. And I think that's the type of forgiveness that we really need to have, the exoneration, the mutual exoneration. So
yeah,
I think it was worthwhile, because we
these
do
are
get
all,
caught up. So much of our forgiveness is not really exoneration.
yeah, these are all mental exercises, and the residual of that thing always remains there. And you forgive somebody because you have higher ego. I'm forgiving you. I'm a bigger person than you are. And
Right.
so ultimately, the true forgiveness only comes from understanding oneness. And that gives you empathy, and that gives you compassion, and that gives you holistic feeling, and you free yourself for all the drawbacks of this thing which you are holding, the poison.
All right. Well, Ratanjit, with that, we have to say goodbye for today. We want to thank all of you for being wonderful listeners and Zoom participants. However you are listening live or recorded, we appreciate and value you. And we hope that you have a greater understanding of forgiveness, as I do now at this point. Ratanjit, thank you again. And remember, everybody, we're all playing the same game. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
All right. And let me just verify. We are off the air. So now it's the time for all of you to open up your microphones if you'd like to, and give us any additional comments on today's show and what you feel, what you learned, what you still have questions about.
We are very honored to have Dr. Mehta with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm actually honored to be part of this. I just want to make a simple comment. At my level, I'm not a very high level person, and being a physician, I've been through a lot of these processes as a physician. I've made mistakes, and I've done a lot of things that I may or may not have regretted all the time. Some were done with good intentions, but I just wanted to let you know that anytime we forgive it, let's say, and not forget it, we truly hurting ourselves physiologically, as Ratanjit pointed out initially.
Absolutely.
That physiologically you are causing your high blood pressure go up, your cortisol level goes up and whatnot, and none of these are good effects. In fact, you're hurting your heart. And I'm a pediatric cardiologist. But I also want to just make a point that anytime we fall, the falling may not be bad. What bad is when you don't get up. And this is one of these opportunities that I look at it, is just like Ratanjit pointed out in an example. If you really forgive it unconditionally, for example, for whatever harm is done to you, and you go to that individual and think this is your opportunity to make a brand new friend, a good friend at the same time, you will never, or he will never forget it. So for example, I'm done harm by XY person, and he thinks that you will not forgive him or whatever. You go to him, forgive it, say, I understand whatever you did must have been a good reason. How about if we make friends now? How about if I tell you, guaranteed you that you will make a good friends. It'll be good for your heart, good for your body, and probably his too. And this is the point I want to make it. This may be our opportunity to make new friends, a wonderful opportunity that we often not avail it. And I did it to a lot of my patients and their families.
Yeah, very good. Excellent point. The way, instead of telling them, say, hey, I'm sorry, and we want to be friends, you have to do something for him to touch that person. So some good act which allows you to express your feeling would make a difference. So that is just to add to that. Just words are good, words are not enough. So you have to actually show in your actions you are able to help that person or able to do something for that person, which will transform that into a true friendship.
Very good. Thank you, Doctor.
Ray?
Yes.
Steve Marsh.
Steve.
And what's really nice for me is see Dr. Mehta, who lives 4 houses down from me across the street. And unbelievably.
It was me.
Yeah, that's me. Here, I'll put my face on. You'll know who it is. Okay, now you know who it is. So we're neighbors and friends. Who knew?
Okay, so let's just understand this, doctors, is that you're going up to the internet, up into the cloud, and you're coming back down to see each other when all you have to do is open up your window, right?
Right. That's it. It's exactly right.
Okay.
So what a nice surprise. So I wanted, and this might be another show, but I also wanted to look from another aspect. So let's say that this whole discussion was about how others wronged us and how if we've made a mistake and we know that we have wronged others, whether it was, as Doctor said, it was on purpose or something happened and it gave a bad result to the other person. If we talk about oneness, should we not pick up the phone or meet with the person and say, I'm sorry for this, maybe explain why it happened, or maybe just say, I'm sorry that happened. So I want to know it from the other aspect, when it's us, when we've caused the problem, if you will.
Absolutely. And not only that, I agree with you that we do need to tell what circumstances led you to do harm to others, because that will help him. Like Ratanjit said, forgiveness is an incomplete process. You have to tell the reason, for whatever reason you did it. Without that, expecting an unconditional forgiveness is very hard. He has to be almost like saint, like Ratanjit, giving unconditional forgiveness. I think it's a good point. You have to say why you did it, why it happened. You may not have done intentionally. Ratanjit, you want to make a comment?
No, absolutely, because most of us are parked in brain mode. So we are always looking for a reason to explain why it happened. So we are not in the spiritual mode most of the time. So spiritual mode does not need any explanation. Basically, a compassion and love and empathy is all is required.
Do we need to show something also, just like you pointed out, you have to do something?
Absolutely.
Do we need to do something here too?
Absolutely. That always makes it more genuine.
So give me an example. What do you expect people do, or what you expect others do to you to complete the forgiveness process? I didn't know when you said we have to do something. Doing what?
So you have to understand what their needs and what the circumstances are. If you are able to, if you're able to help them, if there is somebody who is handicapped and you are able to provide some additional help to help them, so they they will appreciate that. So you have to know their circumstances, what will help them. So ultimately, your only intention is to help them, not to impress them, basically help them.
You know, it would seem to me that overcoming our ego to be able to say I'm sorry, overcoming, our feelings like, wow, do I really want to admit that I was wrong? Do I really want to lower myself to say I'm sorry? That's the big part of it. I mean, that I've been willing to do that. It's so easy to do the action part of it after that. I mean, to buy a little gift or to do something physical as part of that is the easiest thing. That just takes spending a couple dollars or spending a little time to do an action. The hard part is admitting that I am wrong, and
both have to go simultaneously.
They do, but it's easy to buy a gift or to buy a card or to spend an hour in a visit. I mean, that's once I've overcome my ego and I'm willing to say I'm sorry, that's the throw in my mind. That's the hard part was overcoming my own ego to admit that I was wrong.
Ray, you're absolutely right. I think often people, they say that I am sorry, but they don't mean it. It has to mean it. It has to come from inside to relieve all those bad effects from the stress that you causing yourself by holding, not forgiving, totally, unconditional. That's the whole point of being at Ratanjit's level. It's not easy. It's not easy. No. All you have to think is, it's good for you. If you do the unconditional forgiveness. Help me out, guys. I'm the first timer here. Is that?
Oh, we love having you.
Want to make some comments on my?
Yeah, good. Did we lose others?
No, they're all here. Doug, we haven't heard from Doug post-show yet today. Doug, you've been listening today.
I have a
and Kim,
comment.
We want to hear from Kim too.
Actually, it's this has been a very interesting show. It's my little mind doesn't think near deep enough to really follow all of it, but it was fantastic. And interestingly, I haven't had that many incidents in my long life of being forgiven or forgiving other people. But one thing that crosses my mind is a little bit different with a situation that I have been involved with. When an individual does something, and it's well known that they did it, and people around are saying we need to just forgive this person for what they did and get on with our life, as you said. But that individual doesn't admit or doesn't agree that they did it. They say,
they don't think they did anything wrong.
So how do you forgive somebody in that situation when they will really never admit that they did this thing that we need to forgive them for?
So why is it so important for them to admit it? Is the question you need to ask. Is it important to you really to make your health come back to normal?
See, what happens is if you have somebody who has done wrong to you, but not in their eyes, they haven't done anything wrong, but you feel that they have done wrong to you. And you go to them and say that I forgive you. So they're going to say, forgive me for what? I haven't done anything. So it is other way around. So what happens is, so in your mind, the forgiveness is your personal exercise. You are not doing it for them. And once you have compassion and empathy for them, your behavior towards them is normalized. So fundamentally, you begin to respect them as if they have not done anything. So it is more important in most circumstances not to say, I forgive you, because that is your ego is telling you, satisfying yourself that I have forgiven you. So basically, you normalizing everything is ultimately forgiving.
It's for your own good, Doug.
Yeah.
That's the issue what we are talking about. You have to normalize yourself.
Kim, you have a comment?
Yeah, we haven't heard from our one female participant today. Kim?
Your mic. Kim, your mic.
Yeah, this has been a very interesting conversation. And for me, I feel like I have been a huge reservoir of pain. And the most beautiful thing out of this conversation is when you can get to the other side and access forgiveness, the release that you have personally, because holding on to it and what that does to you, as the doctor said, your health, harboring resentment, anger, hurt, pain, sadness, all of that is so heavy, in your life. I'm a sexual abuse survivor since 9 years old. I grew up in a community where only 8% of the kids were passing the proficiency test and 80% of the families were living in poverty. There was a lot of violence in the community. I was a teenage mother, a single mom, and had a lot of hurt feelings and broken dreams. I'm also the first to graduate college in the family and to achieve a master's degree and start a business. And I've launched 3 beautiful kids off to great academic higher education institutions. But withholding the pain and not processing it personally and being so angry and hurt for not having the support. You know, I became my father's legal guardian when I was only 19. He was slammed into a tree in a pole riding with an inebriated friend who gave him a ride at a bus stop. Like, life made no sense, the incredible pain, but I held on to the faith, you know, that God would make a way for me and that I was going to change the trajectory of the family. But it wasn't until I got the impact on my health, you know, hating my mom for not protecting me, or hating the person who destroyed my dad's life, or hating, you know, my ex-partner for not supporting me and the children, only made my journey a million times harder. Only made it a million times harder. And here's what I came up with. The reservoir that holds the poison, yes, if you throw it on, no, acid. Acid destroys what you throw it on, but it also corrodes the container that holds it. And I said, they don't have enough cold cream. Mary Kay doesn't make enough cold cream to get rid of those kind of wrinkles. It's just not worth it for me to hold on to that. You know, me holding on to all of that pain and anger is like me taking the sip of poison, hoping that someone else dies. I'm only killing me. And I'm not willing to do it. So I'm just going to look in the mirror and pull together. I said, don't go through something, grow through it. I now coach others. I coach teenage moms and single moms and people who have been through difficult circumstances. And it's like, don't go through it, grow through it, and learn to integrate it so that you can repurpose all of those experiences. To me, my life is going from shattered glass to a mosaic. Wow. From shattered glass moments, every painful space was like a shattered glass moment. But what are beautiful mosaics made out of? Shattered glass. Figure out how to put invisible glue on it, frame it, and raise it, and go and live your life and shine. Because if you're still here, there's a reason why. And I'm still creating that. I'm still learning that. But I refuse to allow any hit to just hurt me. If I can get up, I'm going to use it to empower my life and somebody else's, to be a light that shines. That's where I am.
Kim, I'm sorry to hear what you've been through, but I also applaud all your efforts to where you are. Really, I mean it. Look at what you have achieved despite all the unforeseen bad circumstances, the challenging circumstances. And look at you now. You're raising kids, beautiful kids. They are all successful. You fought back. You're determined. Wow. They are beautiful family.
Look at my son my daughter is golfer. My son took his football team to the playoffs. One went to John Carroll, one went to Morehouse, the other one went to Grinnell in Iowa. And we're just getting started. We are just getting started. Look at this.
No, you are a hero.
You are a hero. You know, it's just unbelievable.
God gets the final say. I always say, do not put a period where God has placed a comma. It's not over until it is. And I don't know, but I know who. I know I'm connected, and it's okay. It's going to be okay no matter what. The only way I lose is if I quit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
And
I come here, not just for me, I come here so that I can get nourished, because as a leader, everybody needs you. How are you taking care of you? So being in this conversation with you beautiful people, even this morning, you know, if I get one nugget that I can use to share with someone else that makes a difference, then it was worth me being up, being engaged in a class, a seminar, being intentional about the conversations and communities where I plant myself, because I feel like I get my life when I give it away. I vicariously win when I can make a difference with others. So that's the oneness that Ratanjit talks about, which is why I'm so attracted to him and the community of people that he generates, he and Ray. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank
We
you.
all applaud your determination, Ken.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
For sure.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing all those personal experiences and thoughts with us. That's not easy to share that either, but thank you for doing that, because sometimes we have to know the background and the understanding to see the progress that you've made, and it is amazing. I mean, just, you know, almost incomprehensible that you can rise like the phoenix from the ashes and do amazing things. You said you wanted to change the trajectory of your whole family. You've changed it for generations to come. Permanently, you've made that change.
Yes, yes, I have.
Amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So
Well, have we heard from everybody? Anybody else have any thoughts? We'd love to hear from you.
that's it.
If not, we'll call it a day.